I love train travel. My family and I have been across Canada. My husband and I have taken the Orient Express in Europe, which is wonderful. Then I heard they have one in Asia. You leave from Singapore all the way up through the jungles of the Malay Peninsula, ticket, money, passport, to Bangkok. Imagine the scenery, imagine the history, imagine the food, imagine the shopping. So sign me up, and I'm off to Singapore. Singapore is trying to shake off a little bit of its dour image with first-class amenities. The airline is one. This is the airport, Changi Airport, which is unbelievable. You can get a shower here, a massage, there's a movie theater. Around the baggage conveyor belts, there are orchids growing, and there are all these signs of the GST here. It's the motto, greet, smile, and thank. To begin with, you take a long but lovely flight on Singapore Air to the city-state at the tip of the Malay Peninsula. You'd better pack nice clothes because you'll be dressing up for dinner on the Eastern and Oriental Express, the train heading north, with stops at Penang in Malaysia and the River Kwai in Thailand. But first, welcome to Singapore. To say that Singapore is neat and orderly is to say that Canadians are polite and Swiss are punctual. It somewhat understates the case. The old joke is that Singapore is a fine city. You can get severely fined for all kinds of things, from chewing gum to being gay, though we saw no one charged with anything. This is the lion, the symbol of Singapore. The legend has it that centuries ago, the son of an Indonesian prince came here to hunt and saw this ferocious beast and thought it was a lion, and so called the city, or called this place, Singa, for lion, or city, Singapore. It has been described to me as a tropical Toronto because it's so multicultural, which is unusual in Asia, and so clean and functions so well. So that's how it's been described, tropical Toronto. I'm sure they meant that as a compliment. Now seen from the huge harbour where the legendary Sir Stamford Raffles established the British colonial presence, Singapore is a gleaming jewel of skyscrapers and affluence, barely a stone's throw from the third world, with lots to explore. First stop is the city's award-winning zoo, renowned for its open-concept design and free-ranging animals. The big feature is having breakfast with an orangutan. They are adorable, but they must have partied a bit too hard the night before because on this morning, they were not available for breakfast.
Hi, what's your name, man? Valerie. Valerie, where are you from? Canada. Okay, Valerie.
The Meerkats were pinch-hitting that day and playing Find the Grape with Valerie from Canada.
All right, he's taking a sniff of that hand and he's found the grape. Very good, don't you think? Come on.
The zoo staff kindly let me feed the orangutans after all, although I don't think they were impressed at all, or why should they be, with my throwing arm. They look like my kids a little bit. This is something you're not supposed to do, but I got special permission to throw a little fruit to the orangutans. This is, I guess, one of the most famous exhibits at the Singapore Zoo. There are 26 of them from Sumatra and Borneo, and absolutely gorgeous, having breakfast with the people who come and visit. You wander around the zoo and it's lovely. I mean, partly you think, oh my gosh, this is normal habitat because it is a tropical zoo. And the other thing that strikes you is, you know, there are no cages. There are no fences, there are no barriers. There are psychological barriers. They use moats and things like that to separate the animals from the people, but you can see them in their own habitat, and it does seem so natural that way. And yet, even more sublime in this bustling commercial center is the orchid garden that attracted me and this tour group from Naples. Acres of one of a girl's favorite things. I am so totally jealous. This is a beautiful place. The orchids are unbelievable. I'd kill to grow orchids like this. This is the Hall of Fame kind of the orchid garden. If you are a famous big deal person and you visit Singapore, they may name an orchid after you. This one's for Margaret Thatcher. Looks a little prickly there. There's one for Queen Elizabeth as well, Nelson Mandela, the Emperor of Japan. You don't even have to be famous. There's one there for the 7 millionth visitor to Singapore. They got their own orchid. And this gorgeous one for Princess Diana. Hello. Hello, doctor. So what? Well, the orangutans may have stood me up for breakfast, but thank goodness the doctor at the Imperial Herbal Restaurant was around for lunch. Here, the herbalist examines me for the wear and tear that travel hosts suffer on their yin and yang. You don't so much as order a meal. You get a prescription. Does he think I'll live?
Later will tell you.
He'll tell me. That's good news.
You have the drinks, have some cooling food, like veggie, fish, chicken, and drink more water, and have some fruit.
Fruit and cooling things.
Then maybe the Singapore weather is different, that's why your pound is a bit changing.
That's right.
That's not true, big trouble.
Thank you very much. So this is what the doctor has prescribed for me. This is egg whites in a little potato basket with polygonatum and ladybell root, which is good for my lungs and my complexion. And I've got melon soup here to cool my blood and to make me healthier. And for water retention. And the hot prawns, the chili prawns, which would be terrific for my brain and my kidneys. It's a delicious mix of seafood and vegetables, but what on earth is polygonatum? And are they serious about the wine fortified with deer penis? The honeysuckle jelly is supposed to cool me, but it tastes a little bit like lozenges. Not bad. So what do you think? Do I look balanced? Yin and yang? I actually said no to the Superman wine, which has been soaking in deer penis. I don't care what year it is. I'm not drinking the Superman wine. Anyway, this was very delicious. If problems with your yin and yang persist, you can try a slightly more contemporary treatment, like staying in the sumptuous elegance of the Four Seasons in Singapore. This suite is said to be a favorite of touring celebrities like Tom Cruise. After a day in the punishing heat of Southeast Asia, you can just take the elevator to the second-floor tennis court, where the resident pro will flatter your every shot. It was too big. Well, when you're in Singapore, where you play tennis, of course, is in the indoor air-conditioned tennis court, the opposite of what people in most climates do. So this is Joachim, who's the tennis pro at the Four Seasons, and he's playing with me. People like Elton John, etc. This is what we do when we're in Singapore. And then, yinned and yanged and pampered at the Four Seasons, it's train time. Wow, this is your basic fantasy, isn't it? There's my boarding pass for the Eastern and Oriental Express. Exquisite train heading up the Malay Peninsula. Look at the ports of call. We're getting on in Singapore, Kuala Lumpur, Butterworth, and Bangkok. Unbelievable. Three days and 2 nights on board the E&O as it snakes its way up the Malay Peninsula. There is something about train travel that gives you a window on a world gone by, before jets and cell phones and television for that matter. All the better when it's a luxury hotel on wheels. But just one last word on Singapore. We've just pulled out of Singapore across the Strait of Johor into Malaysia. And Singapore was great. Actually surprised me a little bit, you know, how exciting and interesting a city it was, and not just a city full of rules. The rules seemed to make it work extremely well. maybe I just like all these rules, but the traffic congestion is kept down by huge rules and pollution, things like that. Very livable, easy to get around. Someone described it as Asia for beginners, which, you know, that may be me. So maybe it suited me that way. And of course, the two main hobbies are shopping and eating. What could be better than that? So there are lots of rules which they can make fun of or not, but it runs well. And now we're entering Malaysia, and I could now get my gum back out.
The first train in Malaya was built by the Sultan of Johor in 1869, but being made entirely of wood, it was quickly eaten by ants. This line from Singapore to Thailand really only dates from the 1920s. And not until 1991 did the countries sign agreements to let a single deluxe train ride the whole 2,000 kilometers. It looks like the set from one of those merchant ivory movies of love and empire, when one had luncheon with crisp linens, polished silver, and china. Let me just pause and consider how romantic and relaxing this would be without a camera crew.
Of Malaysia, but what we can see, what's really interesting to me right now, is a view of the Petronas Towers, which are the tallest buildings in the world right now. Huge structures that are conjoined, and really interesting, I guess, all the more given what we saw happen to the World Trade Center in New York, and imagining buildings that huge, and there is sort of more of a fascination with them now.
They were an awesome sight and moving in a post-9/11 way. But every time we tried to set up and get a real shot of them, something got in the way. Rush hour, smog, trees, expressway off-ramps.
Can't see anything though, eh?
It got to be like one of those Simpsons Road episodes. Something like Homer takes a train and misses the tallest buildings on the planet. How can you do that? No, they're there. No, there. Oh, no. Anyway, we tried, but it soon became time for dinner in the Malaya car. It's not just elegant, but amazing how the kitchen staff can prepare lovely things in such a cramped space. I've seen broom closets bigger than what they've got to turn out gourmet meals.
Well, this is pretty elegant. Dinner on the Eastern and Oriental, well, it's chicken curry tonight, which looks fantastic. And you know it was totally fun? Getting dressed for dinner, doing your hair, putting on makeup and all that stuff, watching the countryside fly by. Crossing the Straits of Malacca now, over to Penang, which I guess so many people know from the American GI R&R, and this, you know, beautiful island, which is actually trying to become a World Heritage Site. It's just been subject to waves of colonization from the Portuguese and the Dutch, and then of course the British. The main town over there is Georgetown, after bad old George III. And in fact, the town that you embark on this ferry from is Butterworth, after a governor. So the British influence is still at least in the names, even though Malaysia got independence in 1957.
There is something about markets, like trains, that gives you a window on simpler times. Although it doesn't feel like anything gets very complicated these days in Penang. It's a bit of a spree, guides taking a train full of people through the downtown for something called a trishaw ride, which is a cross between a rickshaw and a tricycle. And since I've been cooped up for a couple of days now, I could use a workout. And these guys could probably use a break.
Can I ride? How are you? And then I'll trade places with you? I ride?
They don't give up control easily.
Yeah. Yeah? Is that okay? How hard? Is it hard?
They're kind of clunkier than they look and tough to handle.
This is hard.
Especially in traffic, and there is no shortage of that.
Okay.
So much for my trishaw career.
It's hilarious, this convoy of Western tourists careening through the streets of Penang, in capable hands no doubt, but right out there in traffic. And Penang is wonderful. Turn a corner and you've left Chinatown, there's a blast of music, tells you you're in Little India. The city is a treasure trove of ornate little temples and churches which you only get to see from the middle of your trishaw horde. There's little sign of the old GI hangouts, and the architecture is lovely. Glimpses of the town's colonial past.
Yeah, this is the old clock tower. It was donated by one of the Penang millionaire, one of the richest men in Penang Island. So he donated this clock tower for the people here around this area to see the time, the time.
This is my friend Peter. He is a local historian and trishaw driver extraordinaire. He was a clerk, as he puts it, with an insurance company before he was laid off. And he seems to know everything about every inch of the place.
And now we are on Parker Street. Here is the old Chinatown. This is the first place where Sir Francis Light from England, where this is the first town where all the British people, they come here. They come here, they open the jungle here first, sir. But here is most probably all jungles, because here is near to the sea coast. So they shoot it in the jungle. They shoot silver coins, gold coins.
And he is wonderful.
The Dayaks, the Malaysian people, the Penang people here.
Back on board the E&O, my highly developed instincts tell me that things have changed. The flora and fauna are different now, and geologically the makeup of the land has changed. And I observe that we are crossing from Malaysia into Thailand. I guess it was that, and the Thai dancer in the bar car. But with the strains of traditional Thai music filtered quite pleasantly through that Australian wine they made me drink, it's time for bed. There's a wonderful diary entry from a woman named Alice Beaumont who did this. She was an English woman who did this trip from Bangkok to Singapore in 1902, and she wrote, "The room steward has been in my room and kindly turned down the bed linens and left the window slightly ajar so the compartment fills with a wonderful hint of night-blooming orchids and other tropical aromas. Curled up beneath the sheets, I drift into a deep sleep and dream of exotic places to come." We're just a couple of hours out of Bangkok now, and the train is actually crossing the bridge over the River Kwai. The real bridge, like the one they showed in the classic movie with Alec Guinness, was destroyed by Allied bombs in 1945. The day's tour is a boat ride down the Kwai to the military cemetery. Despite the somber note, the day trip is extremely pleasant. These days, this is cottage country for the affluent of Bangkok.
We're floating down the River Kwai actually to the cemetery, the POW cemetery, and they've been showing us how to fold these lotus leaves so we can make it kind of as an offering. I'm not the most artsy craftsy person in the world. You take the leaf and you float it, turn it into a triangle. But what it's supposed to end up is like that. How did you do that? It's supposed to be a womanly art.
Well, you're not like yours triangular enough.
Oh, okay. How do you know how to do that?
Well, I just watched the lady do it.
I watched her too.
Well, you got square ends.
I think you get to there, they start breaking. That's fantastic.
And how very odd, in a good way that's hard to describe, getting an informal lotus origami lesson from Japanese tourists on the way to one of World War II's grimmest scenes. In the war, the Japanese wanted a supply route linking Thailand and Burma. 16,000 Allied prisoners of war and maybe 100,000 Asian workers died from mistreatment, starvation, and disease, building what came to be called the Death Railway. Mostly British soldiers are buried here.
Oh, there's just an unknown soldier. Maybe we'll give him the jasmine. He's already got one.
The inscriptions become almost too much to bear. Consider Corporal L.H. Gerald, who now brings tears to your eyes with a corner of a foreign field that is forever England. And like military cemeteries everywhere, the well-tended serenity reminds you of the agonizing hell they had to endure. It's very moving and emotional.
This is so beautifully kept. It doesn't matter where you go in the world. War cemeteries are always so moving and touching. I guess the ones in Normandy, because they're so huge, sort of impress you in that sense. But here you look at this. I mean, as soon as it becomes personal, Sergeant Downer, age 23, days are passing, years go by, but memories of you, dear son, will never die. They're just so sad. I'll give him my lotus.
Back on board now for final approach. The Bangkok skyline is on the horizon through the haze and blistering heat that always seem to envelop this part of the world. Though near one of the world's great cities, I am recalling the unexpected joys of Singapore. Penang, which I barely knew existed, and the pleasure of meeting Peter, the trishaw driver. For a few days, thanks to the E&O, I got to commune with the spirits of another era, as a grand dame of the 20s might have made the grand tour. I remember reading a travel book somewhere that in trips and life, it's not so much about the arrival. The journey is the destination.